I want to begin with a story about a tree, and it's called The Seasons of Life. You might have heard it. But there was a man who had 4 sons, and he wanted his sons to learn not to judge things too quickly. So he sent them each on a quest to go and look at a pear tree that was a great distance away. The first son went in the winter, the second in the spring, the third in the summer, and the youngest son in the fall. When they had all gone and come back, he called them together and asked them to describe what they had seen. The first son said that the tree was ugly, bent, and twisted. The second son said no, it was covered with green buds and full of promise. The third son disagreed with them both and said it was laden with blossoms that smelled so sweet and looked so beautiful. It was the most graceful thing he had ever seen. Well, the last son said, no, you are all wrong. It was drooping with ripe fruit, full of life and fulfillment. The man then explained to his sons that all 4 of them were right, because they had each seen one different season in the tree's life. He told them, you cannot judge a tree or a person by only one season. That the essence of who they are, the pleasure, joy, and love that comes from that life can only be measured at the end, when the seasons are complete. If you give up when it's winter, you will miss the promise of your spring, the beauty of your summer, the fulfillment of your fall. Don't judge a life by one difficult season. Don't let the pain of one season destroy the joy of all the rest. Good advice, and we can only do that if we stay in the moment and accept what that moment has to offer. And that we call mindfulness. The practice of paying deliberate, non-judgmental attention to the present moment, which includes thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and the surrounding environment. Sounds good, and I know we have all heard about the importance of mindfulness. But, believe it or not, there is a shadow side of mindfulness that we should be aware of. So says David Loy, an American author and Zen teacher. In an essay of the same title, he writes that suddenly the mindfulness movement has become mainstream, making its way into schools, corporations, prisons, and government agencies, including the military. The media now regularly cites scientific studies that report on the numerous health benefits of mindfulness meditation. Yet there is a shadow, most evident in the ways that corporations have embraced the practice. In order to make mindfulness palatable to the business world, he says, it has portrayed it as stress reduction and attention enhancement. And he calls this stripped down approach McMindfulness. Its spiritual roots have been forgotten, as has its foundation in social ethics with the purpose of transformation. Rather than seeing mindfulness as a means to awaken individuals and organizations from the 3 poisons that the Buddha identified, greed, ill will, and delusion, it is sometimes refashioned into a technique that can indirectly reinforce those very unwholesome roots, those 3 poisons. Secularizing or materializing mindfulness has created a shadow side. Cindy Wigglesworth, an author and inspirational consultant who is the founder of Deep Change, which is a leadership and personal development company, wanted to make spiritual practices such as mindfulness palatable to the business world, but keep its spiritual roots. And I had the opportunity to hear her speak in one of my online Zoom classes with the Integrative Ministries program that I'm enrolled in at Unity Worldwide. And she told us of her aha moment. When I was about 12 years into my career at Exxon, I knew that I was not going to be there until retirement. I could feel the divine discontent stirring, nudging me to do something else, but I didn't know what that something else was. I read books about purpose and thought about it a lot, but I wasn't sure what I was to do next. Finally, I realized it was time to turn it over to God. So I prayed and affirmed that a right and perfect next path would reveal itself. I prayed for 2 years before I got an answer. And she writes, I was sitting in a retreat when the answer hit me. I had just arrived and was sitting in an old prayer chapel. I stilled my mind and pointed my thoughts toward the divine, and suddenly a thought arrived in my head, and I heard it and felt it simultaneously. The idea was Jesus with a job and Buddha with a briefcase. Wow, I was stunned. It summed up so many things for me, she said. I had been trying to find a way to apply my spirituality at work. 2 days later, sitting in the new prayer chapel during silent meditation, she envisioned in her mind a newspaper column entitled Spirit at Work. I said, thank you, God, Spirit, and my higher intuitive self for such a brilliant idea. It named my pain and my path. How could I bring spiritual intelligence to the workplace? After that moment of insight, it took me 5 years of preparation, studying as well as financial and emotional preparation to leave Exxon and launch my new career. But the clarity of that guidance was profound and life-altering, and it all began with me asking and waiting in faith and trust. And I know you have heard of IQ, intellectual quotient, and EQ, we did a class on that, emotional quotient. Well, she created SQ, spiritual quotient, or spiritual intelligence, which she defines as the ability to act with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, regardless of the circumstances. And she wrote a book called The 21 Skills of SI, or Spiritual Intelligence. And in the book, she outlines 21 measurable skills for wisdom, compassion, and authentic leadership, and includes a skills assessment. Each of us in the class were required to read the book and take the assessment, which was rather lengthy. And then we were to allow someone, her, in our case, to review and evaluate it and provide feedback. It assessed qualities such as humility, presence, courage, authenticity, and the ability to hold competing ideas without feeling destabilized. Well, I'm not going to share my results with you here. It would take too much time, but in honor of full transparency, I will share where I scored the lowest, and it may shock you. It appears I struggle with understanding and staying in loving and open dialogue with those who do not share my values or have a similar moral compass. Shocking, isn't it? I'm a work in progress. I also will not share with you all 21 skills, so just breathe. It is a teaching talk today. But I will briefly show one slide of how the skills are divided, and it's divided into 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1, awareness of your higher self versus your ego self. Quadrant 2, awareness of the outer world and other people's worldviews. Quadrants 3 and 4 move from awareness into mastery. And in her framework, she does not tie SI or SQ to any specific religion or belief system. She wanted to make it faith-friendly so that it could be developed by anyone, from atheists to people of faith, to those who identify as spiritual but not religious. And she outlined 9 steps she called spiritual weightlifting, which is a metaphor for strengthening the capacity to shift from ego-centered thinking to actions originating from the more loving and peaceful divine higher self. And she writes that as we do our spiritual weightlifting, we can masterfully connect to and live from our highest self. An SI, or spiritually intelligent person, can shift in the midst of the most challenging moments that prevent the ego from driving our actions. And the steps are, step 1, stop, pause. The first step is often the hardest. In the midst of a challenging moment, just stop and insert a pause between the event that triggered something within you and the habitual response that is bursting to get out of you. 2, breathe. Take 4 or 5 long, slow, deep breaths. 3, ask for help from your higher self, the divine, or other people that you trust. You can ask your own higher self, and you may call it your intuition or inner guidance, the God within, the God of your being, and then enter into an internal mental dialogue. You are not just talking to yourself. You are in dialogue with the God of your being, your higher self. 4, observe. Observe your body, how it's responding, your heart, how you're feeling, your mind. And observing these 3 dimensions, to do that, you pay attention. You pay attention to your body, your emotions, and to your thoughts. And 5, identify, and this was new to me, and embrace your ego concerns. She writes, I like to enter fully into the perspective of the ego to see what it is afraid of and what just might be true before I start discounting it. I am giving my ego a chance to speak to me as a separate voice. And this actually is typical voice dialogue, a technique used in psychology, allowing the separate voices of the self to have a conversation. Voice dialogue creates a separation that is helpful in that you realize that you are not your ego. That voice is not who you are. It's probably your mom's. No. You do have an ego, but it is not the real you. And the more my central self, Cathy, can listen to the voice of my ego, I could then talk back to it and say, thank you. I know you're trying to protect me, but you can relax now. I see and understand what is going on, and the God in me will handle it. Treating ego as an ally is more helpful than making an enemy of it. Step number 6, look deeply for root causes of ego concerns. There are, according to Jungian psychologists, 2 root fears of the ego: abandonment and death. Death being an overwhelming loss of identity. So abandonment and death feels kind of the same. Once you have identified the concerns of the ego, you need to dig deeper to find its roots and understand why this particular situation is so highly emotionally charged. What is this trigger about? And the way to do this is to keep asking your ego self, why are you afraid? What is really going on here? And I had a experiment myself recently where I couldn't put a finger on what was bothering me. And it came down that it was fear. And I did this. I said, what am I afraid of? And I had a list of things that I was afraid of. And then after that process, I said, or Spirit said, whatever it is, you can handle it. You've handled it. We've handled it thus far. You can handle it. And number 7 is reframe. Reframe the situation. See with new eyes, the eyes of compassion and wisdom. And the art of reframing means to ask yourself, what else might be going on here? How can I see this differently? When we interpret a situation, we are actually telling a story about it. And we create major and minor characters, and we assign motivations to them, and we develop storylines. Often it's good, me, versus evil, them. And we believe that what we created is just the way things are, and upset is inevitable and is a perfect outcome. But we forget that we created all of this. So let it go. Number 8, refocus. Refocus on something to be grateful for. Our higher self suspends judgment, doesn't assign blame, doesn't assume evil intentions or going into drama. It evaluates what is going on objectively and neutrally. And most importantly, the higher self can see the good in a situation. It can see what is right with the world. It can find the love. I remember when my sister's grandson was dying and was in the hospital, and he was only 16, just turned 16. And in talking with her, I said, concentrate on the love that will be there, the love that is surrounding you. And she called me a couple days later, and she said, that was fantastic. She said, I saw the love from the therapists that came in and the nurses and the doctor. The doctor gave me a hug. They sent a harpist in to play music. She said, I was surrounded by love. And that, I think, is so powerful if we can do that in our most challenging moments. Where can I see the love? It's there, and it'll show up in magnificent, lovely ways. And step number 9, choose a spiritually intelligent response. The most important step is choosing a spiritually intelligent response, a response that does not come from your ego's survival-based reactions, but from the wisdom of your higher self. 9 steps. I can't remember what I had for breakfast, so I'm supposed to remember 9 steps in the middle of an emotionally charged situation? Well, take heart. There is a shortcut. Only 4 steps. And it's an acronym that spells SOUL. Stop. Observe your old habit pattern and breathe. Ask your higher self, your spirit, the God within, for help. In other words, pray. O, observe what is going on in your body, in your emotions, and your thoughts. Include the whole gamut. U, understand. See through their eyes. And L, loving. Compassionate, wise, loving response. Even if all you can say is, let me get back to you on that. It's a lot of information this morning, but I believe that each one of you is up for the challenge. You can be giants in SI, spiritual intelligence. William Ward writes, your Christ consciousness is mightier than the tallest mountain, stronger than the force of the wind, and more powerful than the currents of the sea. Amen. So begin now to harness the power that is within you. It's who you truly are, and become even greater. The world is waiting for you to put that greatness into loving action. May it be so.